For nearly 2 decades, Graham Norton has hosted one of British television's most consistently successful talk shows, built on a specific kind of chemistry, wine-fueled honesty, guests who trade stories rather than plug projects, and a host skilled enough to make almost anyone look good on his red sofa. The show, which premiered on BBC Two in February 2007 before moving to its now familiar Friday night slot on BBC One in 2009, broke from the traditional one-on-one talk show format by seating all of its guests together on a single sofa for the entire episode, letting conversations develop between the celebrities themselves rather than simply bouncing back and forth through the host. That structure, plus a genuine drink or two for guests who want one, and a closing segment called The Big Red Chair, in which audience members compete to tell an entertaining story before Norton can pull a lever and dump them backward out of sight, has made the show feel looser and more unpredictable than most of its competitors on both sides of the Atlantic. But almost anyone is the operative phrase. Over the years, in interviews, at literary festivals, and on other people's talk shows, Norton has been surprisingly candid about the guests who tested him, not out of bitterness, but because, as has put it himself, some nights are simply hard work. Hey, in his own words, are 6 of them. Mark Wahlberg. It was hell. Speaking at the Henley Literary Festival in October 2025, Norton finally named the guest appearance he considers the most difficult of his career. Mark Wahlberg's 2013 visit to promote the film Broken City alongside fellow guests Michael Fassbender and Sarah Silverman. Mark Wahlberg was a weird one because when he arrived, he didn't seem drunk, Norton recalled. He told me about his film, told me a couple of stories about stunts going wrong or whatever, and then it was only 15 minutes into the show when whatever the hell was in his system really took hold. And it was hell. What followed has become one of the most replayed clips in the show's history. Wahlberg spent much of the episode talking over his fellow guests, at one point challenging Fassbender to what Norton has described, with visible amusement even years later, as a big dick contest, and eventually climbing onto Norton's lap and playfully pinching at him while the host tried, with visible strain, to keep the show moving. Silverman, for her part, can be seen on the broadcast visibly irritated as Wahlberg repeatedly cut across her mid-story, at one point directly telling him to be quiet so she could finish. No one could tell a story, Norton said. You tried to tell a story, he'd just interrupt and... At one stage, Michael Fassbender was telling a story and this one was going quite well. He was really getting into the heart of the anecdote. I thought, this one is going well, I wonder why, and I looked over at Mark Wahlberg and he was asleep. Norton has been careful to note that the show doesn't ply its guests with alcohol beyond a drink or two. There will be a drink waiting for you if you want one, and then, while we're showing a clip or getting the music ready, they might be able to rush in and top you up, but the most you can have is 2, 3 tops, he said. So if anyone does want to appear on the show and be drunk, my tip to you would be preload. Wahlberg himself has never fully conceded that he was simply drunk that night. In an interview with Digital Spy shortly after the episode aired, he suggested some of it had been a bit, saying, I tried to do a bit, and some people took it a little too seriously. Norton, for his part, has said he holds no real grudge. Wahlberg has returned to the show multiple times since without incident, appearing again in 2015, 2017, and beyond, which Norton has cited as evidence that the relationship survived the chaos just fine. We love Mark Wahlberg because he's such a big star, the show's longtime co-producer Graham Stewart has said separately. He then came back again and again and again and again, and I say that as a tribute to him and to us, definitely. Mickey Rourke, a half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels. Norton's issues with Mickey Rourke, who appeared on the show in 2008 alongside Jessica Biel and Martha Wainwright, started before Rourke had even reached the studio door. I just happened to be standing there when he got out of the car and he was holding a bottle of Jack Daniels, which is already worrying, Norton told the New Zealand Herald. But then we noticed the bottle of Jack Daniels was half empty. It soon became very clear where that Jack Daniels had gone. Once inside, Rourke's restlessness became its own challenge. He was just exhausting because he wanted to smoke all the time, Norton said. I'd turn away for a second, turn back and he'd have lit another cigarette. It was so boring. You feel like a teacher taking children on a school trip, not a chat show host. Adding to the discomfort that night, Rourke turned his attention toward fellow guest Jessica Biel after watching a clip from her film Easy Virtue, telling her, I have nothing in my house that looks like this, and holding onto a handshake with her noticeably longer than the moment called for while she tried, with obvious discomfort, to pull her hand back. Those nights are quite hard work, Norton has said of evenings like that one, where you're just trying to keep it together and get to the finishing line. Kevin Costner. Jesus, do I have to talk to this man? Unlike Wahlberg or Rourke, Kevin Costner's difficult appearance had nothing to do with intoxication or chaos. If anything, Norton has said the problem was the opposite. Speaking to The Express, Norton recalled the visible reluctance he felt from Costner during their interview. I asked him a question, and he looks at me like, Jesus, do I have to talk to this man? He kind of give a half-assed answer, and Helen Mirren chips in and asks him a question, and he could not be happier. The contrast Norton described, a guest who seemed almost offended by the host's questions but visibly brightened the moment a fellow celebrity guest spoke instead, has stuck with him as one of the more openly uncomfortable dynamics he's had to navigate live, precisely because there was no obvious drama to work with, just a guest who didn't seem to want to be having the conversation at all. Robert De Niro. Why am I telling this? Robert De Niro's difficulty as a guest, according to Norton speaking at the Cheltenham Literature Festival in 2018, came down to a mismatch between his skill as an actor and his instincts as a storyteller. He's not a storyteller or very verbal, Norton said. He's a benign presence. Norton described one particular moment in detail. De Niro had begun what seemed to be building toward a good story, and the host and other guests found themselves genuinely leaning in, hoping it would pay off. We were all leaning in, willing it to be amazing, Norton recalled. Then he finally went, why am I telling this? Nobody had an answer. We cut it. It's a small, almost gentle anecdote compared to some of the others on this list, but Norton has cited it as a reminder that even the most compelling screen presence doesn't automatically translate into an entertaining talk show guest. Sometimes the very thing that makes someone a great actor is the same thing that makes them a reserved, hard-to-draw-out interview subject. Daryl Hannah, anxiety, not attitude. When Norton has been asked directly to name a guest who wasn't a great guest, in a 2024 interview with news.com.au, he pointed to Daryl Hannah's 2002 appearance on V. Graham Norton, but he was quick to frame it with real sympathy rather than criticism. Weirdly, she can do a play, but she's terrified of a studio audience, Norton explained. I guess being herself in front of a studio audience makes her terrified. He noted that Hannah reportedly had a history of severe stage anxiety around talk show appearances specifically, including a rumored incident on The Late Show with David Letterman where she walked out and fainted before an interview could even begin. So she did our show, and bless her, she wasn't a great guest, Norton said. But what I loved was, because she got through it, afterward she was high as a kite. She really felt like she'd done an amazing thing. And I was thrilled for her that she had gotten through it. It was still a very poor show. It's one of the few entries on Norton's list of difficult guests where he's gone out of his way to make clear the issue wasn't ego, rudeness, or intoxication, just a genuine and, by his account, quite serious phobia that happened to collide with a one format built entirely around comfortable, spontaneous conversation. Harvey Weinstein, the worst guest ever. Of everyone Norton has discussed over the years, only one has earned an unqualified, repeated title. Worst, Weinstein appeared on the show in 2015 alongside David Tennant, Olivia Colman, and Jessie J, 2 years before dozens of women came forward publicly with allegations against him, and 5 years before his 2020 conviction on charges of rape and sexual assault. Norton has described the process of booking Weinstein as unusually pushy even before the cameras rolled. The producer had emailed Norton something complimentary out of the blue, Norton has recalled, and then asked to appear on an already fully booked episode. I replied saying, "Oh, thank you so much, but the show is fully booked," Norton said. He emailed back, "What if I blah da blah da blah?" "No, the show is fully booked, blah da blah." And he emailed back again, "But I think," and I just had to turn to my booker and say, "Can you please deal with this?" At the time, Norton has said, he read that persistence as simply the mark of an unusually driven producer, the kind of relentlessness that, in Hollywood, often gets treated as professional virtue rather than a warning sign. At the time, I thought that sort of attitude, that kind of, "Oh no, I'm going on," that is what makes you a very good producer, he said. Looking back with the knowledge of what Weinstein was later proven to have done to dozens of women, Norton has described that same behavior very differently. But of course, now that we know what we know, that is what makes him a predator. It was that kind of weird, tunnel vision thing. Asked years later, after Weinstein's conviction, to name his least favorite guest of all time, Norton didn't hesitate. I often talk around who my least favorite guest was, but someone reminded me. I have a really good answer to this now. It's Harvey Weinstein. He's in jail, so he gets a prize for the worst guest ever. Speaking separately with Andy Cohen on Watch What Happens Live, Norton put it more bluntly still, calling Weinstein simply an awful guest and a bit of an odd man. Unlike his other stories on this list, which Norton tend to tell with real warmth and even affection for the guests involved, his account of Weinstein carries a noticeably different tone, less anecdote, more retrospective unease of how ordinary the warning signs looked at the time. What these stories have in common. Taken together, these 6 accounts say less about any single kind of difficult guest than about how many different forms difficulty can take on live television. Wahlberg's problem was simply too much alcohol and too little filter. Rourke's was restlessness bordering on menace. Costner's was a guest who visibly didn't want to be there and didn't hide it. De Niro's was a mismatch between screen presence and conversational instinct. Hannah's was a real and sympathetically handled anxiety disorder colliding with a format that has no place to hide. And Weinstein's, in hindsight, wasn't really about the interview at all. It was an early, easily missed glimpse of the same entitlement and disregard for boundaries that would later be exposed as something far darker. Norton has told these stories, over years and across very different contexts, less as complaints than as an honest account of what 2 decades on a live red sofa actually looks like. Mostly magic, but not always.